Brad, I was driving down the street the other day and saw a storefront that had a sign on it. And I want to ask you if there is anything more unintentionally funny than a storefront that has a huge sign that says, under new management.
I always wonder about that sign. It's like, is that supposed to make me feel better?
Right? Like, what is that supposed to make me feel other than like, guys, we know we shit the bed, but we're really trying to fix it.
And by the way, if you want me to walk back into a store, tell me that you've improved maybe conditions for the workers or that there's, but 9 chances out of 10, management is not part of why things are good or bad. They're kind of in the way. but tell me you've got improved workers? Now I'm interested.
Yeah, it's also under new management. It's not like there's no benefit that's being spoken of. It's not like our prices are lower. It's not like we're more convenient. It's not like our hours are improved. It's, hey guys, we're not as bad as we used to be. That's basically all you can say under new management. Is like, hey, remember the guy that stole $100,000 from us and also actively tripped customers? Well, he's not here anymore. So,
but now we've got a new manager.
We're under new management. It's the weirdest, most unintentionally funny sign because it's just basically a huge public admission of failure, don't you think?
And it's also like, again, I go back to the workers because under new management basically just means that there's a different person at the top taking an unfair share of all the profits. Usually for doing nothing. It's like, again, I'd love to hear that it was under new workership, but under new management just means that there's a different jerk at the top.
Yeah, here's the new boss, same as the old boss. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Well, speaking of new boss, here is your new boss. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal, Dave Kellett, the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And Brad, I have great news. One of my favorite artists and favorite people in the world, Scott C, is here. So let's waste no time. Let's open the studio door and fire up that third mic, my friend. Well, Brad, the blue bird of spring has brought one of my favorite people in the world into the studio today, Scott C. I'm so happy, Scott, that you were joining us today. I kid you not, one of my favorite artists and illustrators in the world, and also one of the most delightful human beings I've ever met. How are you, my friend?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited to hang out with you guys.
Well, thank you, my friend. We have been trying to get this one on the books forever because you are incredibly popular and busy and working on all sorts of stuff. And so I want to talk real quick about how I first found you, because this is always delightful. I was at, and this will lead into two things, which also will explain why my voice, Scott, is so beat up, because we had a game night this weekend. But many years ago, I was at a game night at Neil Patrick Harris's house, and this is going somewhere to celebrate you, not me. And we were doing running charades, which, if those people don't know it, running charades is there's one person in the center of the house giving clues, and then there's 3 teams in 3 separate bedrooms or living rooms or dining rooms of the house guessing the clues and then running to get the next one, right? So that's how running charade works. Long story short, we were in Neil Patrick Harris's bedroom, and guess what was all over the walls was Scott C's artwork. And I was like, look at this delightful work. And so I was talking with Neil about it, and that's how I first found you, because your artwork was celebrated in his house. And then in the following years, I have come to follow all sorts of works that you've created online, both with great showdowns, gallery shows. I think I went to one of your shows. Did you by chance have one at Gallery Nucleus or 1980 Gallery 88 in Pasadena there?
Oh, I've had many shows. Those are my two galleries in LA that I've shown with many times.
That makes sense. Okay, because I have a physical memory of going to one that I think was a shared show and one that I think that actually was a focus on your work. And both were stunning. But and also then we in subsequent years we were able to get to know each other at the Alaska Comics Camp. But I would love to jump back, if we could, for a minute to when you were, 16, 17, 18. And how did you know, because you ended up going to school in San Francisco, focusing specifically on art. How did you know that was the path for you? What was the signs that you were like, oh, I really want to go into the art world?
Well, I mean, I was I was the art kid since I was very small. I mean, I think 6 years old, I won my first like, like a coloring contest for Easter at the mall. You know, I mean, it was not very interesting looking, but it was just like I had a trophy for it. So it was my first award. I felt like I think my mom was very creative, and she's always encouraging me to do art. So it was always in the cards for me to do it. It was just like, what capacity? I think in my kindergarten, like about me thing, I said I want to draw Star Wars. That was my dream, you know, or even just be in it, whatever. But then, and then I started collecting comics with my brother in junior high and high school, and we became really into it and going to the conventions, meeting all the artists. And that's when I decided, like, I wanted to make comics. Like, I wanted to do X-Men comics primarily, you know. So I would bring all my drawings, my sketchbook to be inked, so I could see what it looked like when it was like really, you know, well inked and stuff like that. I was convinced I was going to get jobs there, you know, and I think I think Neil Adams, my first like real big thing was Neil Adams. So like I showed him because I was a big fan of him, and he's like, whoa, he got really excited, and he picked it up and he took me through the convention and gave me and put my stuff down at this like. I think it was like a heavy metal kind of style, like it was really raunchy comic, and said, you got to hire this kid. And I was like, thank you, Neil Adams. It was like the greatest like feeling in the world. That was like my biggest kind of wonderful feeling thing. And then I was like, nothing ever came of that. But it was like a very mismatched as far as my style goes. But my style was very different back then. I was really wanting to draw that.
Like Brad and I were talking last week about the small little kindnesses from artists you get along the way. And what a kindness that Neil Adams would even try to walk you across the show.
It was incredible. It blew me away. I think I still think about it. It was just such a nice thing to do. But so, I mean, and so I mean, that's what I wanted to do. And so I went to school to do that. And there was very limited classes on that. It was sequential art. It was like, you know, doing it for storyboards for movies, because that's an actual job, but not comic art. So it was like a very small portion of that. And then through that, I was also wanting to do, I got interested in picture books as well. So those are the two things I wanted to do, but I didn't get into that until way later. Because I mean, I was going to get into, I was talking to Dark Horse, and I was almost going to do an Aliens Predator book. I was close.
What an alternate universe Scott C that would have been.
But it was like right when I got out of college, and I was like lazy and I was not motivated, and I worked at a pizza place, and I was just like, this is not I just failed at it, you know? Yeah. So and then, you know, I was lost, and I was in like bands and like just hanging out, partying with my friends. And so I wasn't doing that, you know? And then a friend of mine started working at Lucas that was an illustrator, and they taught her how to animate. And so she said there was like this little, I'm really going long with this.
No, this is great. No, I love wonderful.
This. But, and so I was lost. I was constantly going back to my school and like complaining. I was like, I have no idea what to do with my art. I have no idea what to do. And then and I was checking the job boards, doing little things. And then she said, okay, well, Lucas Learning is the baby version doing Star Wars games for kids. They were looking for background artists. So I went to apply for that. And also, that was also something I was not doing much at all. I mean, I was just focused on drawing amazing human bodies. You know, like backgrounds were not a thing for me. So I was like, okay, I got to learn how to draw. So I remember I went to bring my my portfolio, and she's like, wow, this is great stuff. You don't have a single background in here. And I was like, So she's like, go back and draw backgrounds and come back. So I was like, okay. So I drew some backgrounds and came back. And that was kind of... And so I started doing that job. And then it was a small company, so I was able to art direct and design characters and backgrounds. Yeah. And that was the beginning. And it was drawing Star Wars, which for me, and it was around the time of just before Phantom Menace was kind of coming about. So it was like the very exciting time there, you know.
Because he was sort of revving the engines back up for all sorts of Lucas stuff. So Lucas Learning, were they based in San Francisco? Or was it at the LucasArts building that's over in the Presidio?
Yeah, it was at the LucasArts. Yeah, it was in San Rafael. It was on Lucas Valley Road. You go further up the road, you go to the ranch. Yeah. But we were just right off the freeway.
That's such a cool facility over there. That's really... Did you ever get to go down into the archives? You know, you take the elevator down and you see the stuff at the bottom. Did you get to go down there?
Archives of what? Of
like the physical film? First R2-D2 and stuff. And I'm just curious.
No, I thought, did you go there? Did you do that?
I did. When we did Strip, they had Fred and I come up and screen it up there, and they gave us the tour down in the basement. And so It's
I didn't even know where that stuff was. I thought, because I was on this Lucas, a softball team at Lucas, and we'd always play at the ranch, and there was this big white building, and I thought everything was in that building. And I would fantasize looking at breaking into that building while we were playing softball. But apparently I would have just not seen anything because they're in the basement. Where the heck is that basement?
But like hearing your story from like college to that first big gig is actually really good, because looking back, it's like, well, that's the only way it could have happened. But at the time, doesn't it feel desperate? And you're like on monster.com or whatever job board you can look at, and you're like, I'll take anything. I remember me in my 20s. I was like, I'll take anything. But looking back, we all just had to have those 3 or 4 years where it's like stumbling, trippingly trying to get out into the world. And
Totally.
That's a universal for all of us. So that's super relatable. So when Lucas Learning, I think that got wrapped up or folded. Did you kind of fold with it, or did you move on before that? I
moved on before that because I think after because I had a tumultuous time. I mean, it was a great time, but like I was done art directing and done working in games. Games was never a passion for me necessarily. So I was like, I think by around 2000, I was ready to leave and moved to New York and do something else. But around that time, I became friends with Tim Schafer, and he had finished Grim Fandango with his last game there. And he left to start his company. And then that's when he asked me, and we'd been partying together and doing things. And so he's just like, I want you to come and art direct our first game. So I think I was employee number 6, and we started working on. Yeah, we were in like a little leather shop at that time, and then or a storefront that we got kicked out of, and then we got this garage in Soma district of San Francisco. So,
Brad was the chuckling beginning. Away at the fact that it was a leather shop, not that kind of leather shop, Brad.
I just love the idea that you get kicked out of a leather shop, then you're working in a garage. It just I like those stories that have that kind of element to them. Like, we're just doing this wherever we can, you know.
It felt very punk rock. And I know that Tim started the company in his kitchen.
Yeah.
With his programmer, the first, Dave Dixon was the first programmer, and they started it in his kitchen. This is it. Now we got to get a place to work that's not this kitchen.
And you are currently celebrating the 20-year anniversary of Psychonauts. But can I ask you, because I actually don't know, what is it like to art direct something like that when you get hired in? What does that job look like? What is the day-to-day? How big picture, how small picture is it?
It was very stressful, dude. I mean, it was exciting because we were all young and we were working nonstop, you know, like we were spending the nights there. None of us had families yet. So it was, I think, you know, we learned later that was not how you do it. But also like art directing, it was my first big project. It was a very daunting thing. And most of the people that he built his company in the beginning were from LucasArts, and they had never worked with me before. And, you know, it took a bit of trust to like get them to think, because it was, I was making it, the style of the game was in my style, which was very wonky and cartoony and crazy. And a lot of them were used to building these very simple kind of like, cause it was low poly back in those days. And it was but very realistic kind of Star Wars environments. And so I was pushing them to kind of wonkify everything up. That was the bad word that everyone hated eventually. But so it was a learning process for everyone. And it was them trusting me to do that job was tough. But Peter Chan, he did he helped us, and he was the main concept guy on all of Tim's games, doing the backgrounds. And he's very well respected. So he was always the guy that would come in and say, trust this guy. Let's do this. Let's do this together. And it was fun, but it would be the sort of thing where I'd have to get there at like, you know, 7 a.m, leave at 10 at night, because the beginning of the day and the end of the day is when I could get my work done. And the middle was when I would have to look at everyone's stuff. So but that's also when I started my first web comic with Double Fine Action Comics.
That's right. Yeah,
I was so stressed out in the mornings, and I was so overwhelmed by this game that it was like this one little, I would give myself an hour to do this comic and post it on our website. Yeah. That we didn't have anything out. So we didn't have any output. So it was just, I uploaded it onto the website, and Tim would just he would just write in the news section about a rat problem or whatever. And that's the only way of saying hi to the world. Like, we exist and we're working on something, but it was like our only way of feeling like getting feedback from something we're making. So,
Yeah.
So two questions jump out of that. So with Double Fine, I've always wanted to ask you this. What physical media were you using? What type of pen? Because it had this beautiful, chunky kind of, in a way that I found delightful, lumpy, chunky kind of an artwork, line art. And so what, was that a quill? Was it a brush base? What was that?
I was really into using, it was like a Japanese kind of sponge tip pen. I wish I had
a Pitt Faber-Castell type one, or no?
It's kind of spongy tip. It went to a point, but you could like kind of make really thick and really thin lines.
Oh, if you tilted and I know what you mean.
Squish it and stuff. It was very malleable, and so you're able to get really fun lines and interesting lines. And I was always trying to get like really crazy, kind of like those modern. I don't know what era that is. Like the like from the 50s, like cartoonists would have really lively line work. And that's always the kind of line work that I was more into than like the real clean lines.
It came out great. I always, thank you for answering that, because I always wondered how you drew that physically. So then the second question is, in my one brief foray at Mattel with doing pixel art, I would draw something in 2D, and then they would translate it to pixel art, and I'd be like, well, that's not it. That's not it at all. So I was sort of curious what was that process like for you? Because I've seen some of the concept art that you brought to the game, and then I would look at some of the execution. I was like, oh my God, they nailed the spirit of it perfectly. But I'm sure there must have been times where you're like, well, that turnaround doesn't do at all what I was expecting it to do. How would that work for you? Like, did you at some point have to just accept that it was a give and take process between the pixel artist and you, or was it like, no, I need you all to find more of the 2D art original inspiration in your pixel art?
I think it was just it was a learning process to figure out how we can push those shapes in the environments and in the concept art. And so I would have to supply as much information as I could in those model sheets, and obviously. Turnarounds are difficult for me to even understand. I remember the main character, I tried to make it in clay, and I was like, I can't work in clay. I was trying any form of of expression to tell them how it works, But my model sheets were just bonkers. They were so messy because again, I wasn't using Photoshop to assemble everything. I would draw them all over different papers with marker and things, and I would cut them all out, paste them on a piece of paper, make them kind of look nice, and then I would do a frame around it to make it look, maybe this is like a piece, because I put a frame around it. I drew a little circle around it. But it was the sort of thing where I would do the turnarounds, and then I would do any call outs of how they could bend, because another problem is like they're modeling them in 3D. So how does the hand look like when it bends? How does this look like when it bends? Because lots of times it would just be a tube that bent like this. I'm like, no, there has to be a kink here. There has to bend like this. There has to be an elbow created. Like there are all these call outs. So in the beginning, it was just a lot of like, they would model and I'd be, no, it's got to be this. And I draw this and I paste that on the piece of paper. And it was just like trying to understand the language of it. And eventually they became so good at it that I didn't need to do as many of the call outs, because they knew how the things bent and how the things worked. And also in the environments too, they would model environment and be like, okay, this is good, but the door jamb is straight. There should be no parallel lines, like ever. That you need to kind of figure out how to make them kind of more interesting shapes, So that was like, that was more in the beginning of it. And then they all figured it out, and it was beautiful. They did an incredible job.
Let's talk about that just for a little bit, because that's something that's very unique to somebody like Dave or I, who sit alone in a studio and, work alone. You had to be in a situation where you're working as part of a team. And especially in the beginning, from what it sounds like, you're giving a lot of that's not it kind of feedback, right? It's a lot of, not quite right. How do you navigate that? Because it's got to be a very frustrating experience for the entire team, for them to be like, well, I would imagine the first thing you get with the wrist is, well, that's how we always do it, right? That kind of a totally, pushback. Yeah. How do you navigate having to give somebody what is effectively negative feedback and keep them motivated to continually go towards this thing that you have in your mind that you're trying to make them see?
Well, I think it's the energy. I mean, it's like anytime you give someone feedback, you want to do it in a way that you're like, oh, hey, this is great. but like, this is how we can make it even better. Like, let's work together to make this thing better. And usually each person wants to do the best work. Everyone wants it to be great. And so it's frustrating to get that feedback, but you also want it to be great. So like, there were some people and some interactions that like it wasn't as smooth, but no one likes to hear that kind of criticism.
Of course not.
But most of the time, like, I love being edited. Like, I love like working on books and things. I love that kind of feedback, like how to make it better. Like, even if I work a long time on something, it's just like nice to have that feedback. I'm like, okay, this is how you can do it. So
you are such a better human being than I am, because when I get notes, I'm like, well, you could go right off a cliff. That's I don't want to hear any of this.
I mean, dude, drawing the same character, I have to draw the same character like hundreds and hundreds of times. And sometimes I would show it to Tim, and it's tough when, like, because Tim he doesn't draw. So, but he knows what it is. And this is the tough thing that we all struggle with clients, is like, a client isn't an artist, but you're like, they know it's not right, but they don't know how to say it's not right. They don't know it until they see it. Right. And so it's like, how do you get that feedback? How do you get that feedback from them? And how do you get, so it's a give and take.
And it's frustrating from your standpoint too, because this I can extrapolate from working in newspapers and working with editors who all tended to be word people who were telling me, a graphic artist, what it should be. And it would be the same thing. They would be, I don't know what I want. I just don't want what you did. Yeah. Now go do it again. And then it would be, that's not it either, but I don't know how to tell you. And yet you come out, and that turned me into somebody who needs now to work in an empty studio with nobody around. Somehow that turned you into somebody who sits here and says, I love to be edited. How do you do that?
Well, because Scott also has the best and calmest and happiest energy of any artist I've ever met. Honest to God, Scott, that's true. Is that you have such a Zen joy about you
that's how I feel about you, though.
Oh, do you really? Because I genuinely feel like you have a Zen joy. No matter what situation I've ever seen you in, you're always like, all right, this is great. This will be great. We're going to make this great. It's like, Scott, your car's on fire. No, that's great. You know what? Let me just sketch that up real quick. But I say that with absolute love, is that I feel like you've somehow discovered the secret of life, is that you have such a calmness and joy about you that radiates through your art, but through your personage also, but through your art as well. Like, one of my favorite things about, like, with Great Showdown is, like, it'll be like a mass murderer smiling, and somehow because it's Great Showdown, like, you know what I mean? Like, you've always, your art always, you know what that line with Obama, like, history bends towards truth, is that your art always bends towards joy, even if you're drawing a Great Showdown where it is like these Machiavellian villains. And I know this is a switching up of the topic, but how and why does that happen for you? What is that for you in terms of art?
Well, I think I struggled in San Francisco. That's where I used to live, or like around the time when I was working in Psychonauts, and just in general, I was part of this art collective, and we would do shows together, and we would perform together, and I was part of this like comic. But my buddies, we would make comics, and we would go to like conventions with them. There's all these things, but I still wasn't enjoying it. Like, I wasn't enjoying creating. And so I even started seeing a therapist about it. I was like, why do I not enjoy this? Like, it's not fun for me. Like, I could stop drawing for the rest of my life and be fine. Like, I don't need it, And so many of my friends need it, because they're like, oh my God, I would be out murdering people if I didn't have this, and I just didn't need it. And so I was trying to find that joy. Like, what is it that I like about drawing? And I remember, and we figured out that, like, because I just wanted to get that feeling. I talk about this a lot but when I was a kid, like, the joy you have as a kid when you're drawing, and like, that doesn't matter, like the process of making a thing. So I started working with these kids. It was like this homeless program where I would go and paint with kids, just because it was my only access to kids in a non-creepy way, just to be like, watch them and like listen. I want them to tell me.
Energy of kids. Yeah, exactly.
And they're just drawing and drawing and drawing. I'm like, dude, what are you drawing? Tell me about this. And they're walking me through it. And it's basically an adventure they're having while they're drawing, And I just wanted to keep that joy. Like, that's the joy that I like. And then even doing these art shows, like, I also realized too, because I used to want to draw for Zeta style, realistic. I wanted to be an incredible renderer. And then eventually I was like, that's not the joy that I get from it. I like figuring that out and solving that, but I like to create something that's funny that people will see in a gallery or see in a book, and they'll just laugh and they'll discover.
Right.
You know? And that's what I love. That's what I just love. And I've had an okay life. I'm not like, I didn't have any real true hardships. So I don't have anything to speak to on that. I mean, obviously the world is what it is and that's tough, but I think I've realized that my voice is going to be the thing to help people escape and just feel joy and happiness. And because it makes me happy. And, and I feel like that's good too. And that's what I can give. So, so that's why it's kind of just a part of everything for me. So,
I can see why you seem to gravitate towards watercolor, by the way, because everything that you just said to me is very conducive to working in watercolor, which is kind of it's not that it's not forgiving. It's just that you have to give up a lot of control, what I would consider control, and say, this is what clearly you got to know what the ink is going to do, what the paint is going to do when you hit the paper. But it's just at some point with a watercolor, it's going to do what it's going to do. Right. And you've got to be very much willing to be a little bit go with the flow. You can't be a control freak and work in watercolor. Am I right?
True. And you know what? I think you're totally right. And I think that's why that medium, because I used to struggle with my mediums for a long time. Around that same time, I was seeing the therapist because all my friends are using gouache. They're using acrylic and stuff. And I just couldn't get it to do. It was too much commitment. Even though I know you can color over something, but I would mix a color and I put it down like, it's so decadent. It's there's so much commitment to this. So when I finally discovered watercolors, I was like, I can just ease into it. I can just ease into it, put a little bit of color here, a little bit of color here. It's so faint. I think I chose that color, but I can really make it rich later. I'll punch it up later. But there's something about it that I could build up in a way that makes me feel comfortable. And I enjoy that process. And if I look at my early watercolors to now, like they were always very muted and not a heck of a lot of contrast because I was trying to be old timey with it. I was trying to he's found it in like a dump. And then now I feel like I've grown more confident in the contrast and punching up the values and stuff of it and the saturation stuff. So that's something that through these many, many years, it's helped me get more comfortable with the colors in that painting process.
But now with your book, like you've got a book coming out, Cabin Head and Tree Head. Did I get them in the right order, or is it Tree Head and Cabin Head?
No.
Okay, Cabin Head and Tree Head, which is watercolors, right? And it's a graphic novel, right? So you've got your lettering done. It looks like in watercolor. Am I right so far?
Well, the lettering for the cover and the title page, but the lettering in the book is a font that I made. Yeah.
Okay, thank God, because I'm sitting here looking at some of this stuff, and I'm like, here's a guy who says, I love to be edited. And he's working in watercolor, which is not very editable, right?
No, it's not. You're right.
So I was trying to figure out how you work that all out,
You're totally right. Well, I mean, I think I do it in layers. So we can easily kind of change things out, but there's a painting that doesn't work or there's a part that doesn't work. I can either paint a piece and then patch it in there. Or just repaint that panel. I mean,
so
my style is not tight.
How much digital are you doing there to fix a problem like that? Unless it's a lettering problem.
A little bit, but not a ton. I mean, if it's like blaring enough, then I will just repaint it. Because the thing is, my style is very loose and it's fast. Like I work very fast. So, which is the only way that I'm going to be able to make these books every 6 months. But
we got to talk about that too. Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing. I always think like, oh my God, like when I started doing these books, I was like, okay, am I going to commit to this watercolor style, which is always my style? Or like I always dreamed of hiring a color person because color is not my strong suit. I would want to just do these pages and then have a friend of mine who's really good at color come in and do that. Like I always dreamed of it, but I just can't. I can't do it.
Can I tell you though? I'm a little bit offended that you would say color is not your strong suit. You're amazing. You're amazing at that.
That's nice of you to say, but
anyway, I wish I had your skills. But also, like having seen you draw, and this is maybe helpful for younger artists to hear. one of the things that I find, because I'll just give you a little backstory. For me, in my 20s, say, of my cartooning, and maybe into my 30s, there's no other way to say it than I was gritting and bearing down as I was drawing, because by God, I was going to control these lines. You know what I mean? And it was an unhappy way to draw. It was not joy-filled, right? Because I was trying to control my line. Every line was controlled, and then I would go back over and white out everything. And even after scanning, I would clean it up again, and everything had to be perfect. Yeah. And then I don't know what it was, but I think it was the cartooning of Oliphant, if you guys know Oliphant, who, as his career went on, became increasingly loose and sketcherly, right? Like almost, I'm trying to remember the name of the British illustrator, not Searle. Well, Sir would also work.
But no, I know you're talking about that, but yeah. Quentin Blake, that's great. Who became, just loose and almost crazy. It was like just an explosion of line art. But it was seeing Oliphant's career, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing it wrong. I'm bearing down too much and trying to control the line, where there's a joy in just saying like, that line is what it is. You know what? It landed over there instead of over here, and that's fine. And watching you draw, especially in Alaska, I was actually jealous in a joy-filled way of how much you were just allowing the process to happen. And it was something that over the next 6 months, I was like really trying to allow myself more and more of. And I'll be honest that I haven't yet allowed myself into watercolors, because something about watercolors, I can't, I think it's just a skill issue at this point, but I haven't been able to yet let the watercolor guide me in the way that you do. But my line art, I feel like you genuinely gave me a gift, because I was like, oh, I need to loosen up even more. Watching you physically make marks, I was like, you know what? I'm not loose enough yet. I've just got to let it go a little bit. And honestly, I think you end up with a more joy-filled, more energetic, more in the moment drawing than I'm yet capable of. And it's something that I thank you as a friend, because you genuinely gave me a gift in letting me watch you draw for a minute there, because it's so, it is childlike in a way that a kid just lets the lines happen, and they're not worried about what's going to happen at recess or they're just in that moment making that line, and you really have stumbled on something wonderful there. And so there's no question. That's just a compliment of like, I think you're wonderful. And thank you for, I will take it. That's very nice of you, man. I think your drawings are amazing. So I feel like you're, I don't know. It seems like you're having a lot of fun. Your drawings look perfect.
Well, no, I'm increasingly joy-filled in the process of drawing. And I think, I don't know why, I wish I could go back and give my 20-year-old self that gift. But maybe that was part of the process that I had to go through.
I do the same thing all the time. And then my wife says, 20-year Brad Guigar didn't listen to nobody. Not even the ghost of 50-year-old Brad Guigar coming back. He's not listening to nobody. He had to learn it the hard way. And that's just all there is to it.
I was just going to reinforce that our paths bring us to here. I've never had any regrets, because anything that happens in your life will bring you to, that's what you learn from. So anyways, that's obvious.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're 100% right. But let me ask you something that Brad and I have never really dipped a toe in, which is gallery showings and having your art hung up on a wall, framed, beautiful, people with a glass of white wine standing in front of it, and then you're standing in the room with them, which is also something that Brad and I don't get to experience as much, except for maybe at Comic-Con. What is that like? How did you fall into that world? Because I've been lucky enough to see 2, maybe 3 of your showings in LA. And I'm just sort of curious how that came about, and what is that like, and what is that life like, and how does that fit into your art making for you?
Well, I mean, I've always been a very social person. And that's one thing about like being a cartoonist, is it's a very solo thing, which is great. And if you're wanting to bring solo, but I really like being around people, and I like that kind of feedback. And I would go to shows. I think that stemmed from like in San Francisco, being part of this, like after college, we had a group of us that would create together, and we would start throwing these art shows, because there weren't that many galleries showing that kind of stuff. Like I think Twist or Barry McGee had a show in the modern art in the museum in San Francisco. And it was my first time seeing graffiti art and character-based kind of art in a setting like that. Yeah. And I was inspired, but there are no galleries kind of doing that until I discovered 1988 in Nucleus down here in Los Angeles. That was my first time kind of seeing that. Otherwise, we would have to throw our own shows. So during Ape Expo, which is where so my buddies, Graham Annable and Nathan Stapley, all those guys, we had our little crew, and that was our local show. So we would go to that show, and then we would rent a space to show our stuff. We would. And we would pass out flyers, so people would come.
That's really smart,
by
the way. That's really smart.
Yeah,
that's how we would. Yeah, that's how we would do it.
Can I ask a follow-up? Because it was a night event for a day event, like paired with a day event, right? So the show would go during the day, and then the showing was at night. Is that right? Is that how it would work?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's really okay. Smart. Go
because
ahead.
everyone, because everyone's in town for this, and everyone is like-minded, and so we would want to do stuff at night anyway. So it was like a good way to kind of have a hangout for everybody, and a way to show our art. So and we were all comic artists that worked in video games. So this was like our way of like doing a medium, actually painting something. So everyone paint in whatever, gouache, watercolor, whatever. So those were my first times actually putting stuff in galleries, was when we would rent out spaces and do it ourselves. And then when 1988 and Nucleus invited me at the same time, I met Nucleus through my friend Kazu Kabishi, who does the Amulet books. I did an anthology in Flight, which was a first iteration of my Cabin Head Tree Head stories back in 2007, I think.
That's right. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about. I didn't put that together, but I have that book facing me right now on the shelf. But yes, keep going.
That was my first soiree into the. I did a lot of anthologies in those days, like comic anthologies, because it was fun to just do a story for any reason at all. So I loved being in these collection books, and that was one that actually was well circulated, and then Kazu introduced me to Nucleus, which was always they were always at WonderCon and at the shows. And then so they invited me to a show. I think it was a ninja themed show or something. And then 1988 started doing 8-bit inspired art shows.
Right. I remember those.
And so then they invited Nathan Stapley, who was at Double Fine. And then I joined them. And that was my first time doing, I think I did Paperboy. It was my first watercolor. It was a Paperboy from 1884 instead of 1984. That was my riff. So Wild West Paperboy, and then I did a.
By
big
the way, that
Ninja
game
Scroll
still
piece.
holds up. By the way, that I played that not too long ago. That game is still great. I very much enjoyed Paperboy. But
Dude, I still think about it all the time when I'm driving down the street, and there's a black house, with dark windows. I'm like, it's an evil house. I would not deliver that paper.
No paper for them. No paper for them. Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, that was my intro into it. And then from there, it just grew. I started doing solo shows with those galleries, and then just a bunch of, there were many more galleries that started coming up that were like 1988 and Gallery Nucleus that would show this kind of art. So there are a lot of opportunities for that,
Hey, gang, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And you'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And ho Nelly, if you want even more comics goodness in your life, check out the new drawing show that we're doing with our pal Kevin McShane over at wrongwayshow.com. That's wrongwayshow.com.
In each episode, we'll show you how to draw your favorite cartoon characters the wrong way.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. And you have shown internationally at this point, right? You've had gallery showings. Where and how does that come about? Is that just a fan that is also a gallery owner and they invite you to Spain or France, or what happens?
Well, my friends, so Galerie Art Ludique is in Paris, and they're friends with all the Blue Sky guys, all the film guys, so men and women, like they would have like art shows with all my friends in film and animation. So, and I remember when I visited there, my friend Daisuke, who I worked with at Lucas Learning, he worked at Blue Sky as a colorist, and then he went on to do a bunch of stuff. But he said, you got to go visit my friend's gallery. And then we became friends. And so I did some shows with them there. And then they started an incredible museum there that celebrates all of animation and concept art. And they've done shows with anywhere from Geiger and Mobius to like, Batman and all the animated shit. Anyways, so that's them. And then in Mexico, I did one at a gallery down there that was just someone that actually shows with a lot of the people that I know. in the gallery scene. So it's just kind of word traveling around. Mostly just word traveling around. So.
That's delightful. I would enjoy
everything's intertwined.
To be able to get off a plane in another country, take a cab, go to a gallery, and there is your art. That to me sounds amazing. That's got to be so fun.
It feels so fun. And you're right. I think like the whole feeling of going to shows for you. I mean, I know it's exhausting, but it's like, I'm sure you love meeting fans and meeting people.
I love it. I get a charge out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when Tim Schaefer, my old boss, like he came, we had him visit us at Ape because he was a famous person in this scene, and he would sign autographs. He's like, I should have to pay to have people line up to tell me that I'm good. Yeah. Like that should be, I think about that all the time. Like that's like you don't normally get to like experience that, but it's just fun to like get to know everybody. And then, but in a gallery setting, I really love gallery shows when there's an experience. Like, you get to see the art. But one thing I loved about doing shows at Nucleus is anytime I do a new picture book, we would do a release there with a new book. And then we'd have some environmental thing that you can experience. Like for Hug Machine, we did a big obstacle course, a hugging obstacle course that ended with a huge hug machine that you could wrap around you. And like,
I saw the photos for that, and that looked amazing. Hug Machine, by the way, in general, came out wonderful. I love that book.
Thank you, man. Thank you. But anyways, that's what I love. I love those sorts of experiences.
Well, so the people that can experience for themselves, in June, you're going to have a solo retrospective in New York. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that and what the plan is and when they can go see it and where they can go see it?
Sure. I think it's June 7th. I think that's when it opens. And that's basically like the last, I would say 10 years, actually more of just paintings I've done for prints, for shows, and for other things like... it's just like a kind of retrospective of that. So I have like little bits from my picture books, little bits from my kids illustrations, but also when I do these big pop culture inspired paintings, like, all the characters from Princess Bride together on a hill, or like Stranger Things and things. And so through the years I've done those. So these huge paintings will be there, and then like kind of smaller character based ones. Right. And then also some of my other like underwater, like kind of scenes, and these little coral sports cars that are designed. So there's like a variety of things I've done through the years will be there, and then some new stuff that I'll be supplying for it. So it'll definitely be the biggest show that I've ever done. So I'm excited.
That is so fun. If you are in New York, do yourself a favor and get down to Spoke Art for that. That's going to be, I'm jealous of people in New York that can go see it.
On the Lower East Side, if you guys are anywhere near there.
The ones that I have seen at Nucleus, it was such a joy-filled show. Also because Nucleus is a great space, and they also have a bunch of like-minded, fun merch that's also of. But so if you are in New York, boy, I would highly recommend it. And in general, I should say that if you are interested in looking at more of Scott's stuff and jumping into the books, which are wonderful, and great showdowns, which are wonderful, and getting information, scottc.com is probably the best place to send them, right? Or is there a mailing list or anything like that? Or is it?
There's a mailing list on the site, so you could sign up for mailing lists there. And I post a lot on my Instagram, so that's where I probably am most active as far as like letting people know about stuff.
Yeah. And are you Scott C? I'm not on Insta much anymore. But are you Scott C on Instagram?
I'm Scott Lava.
Scott Lava on. Okay, and that's right. Lava. And you are also at San Diego Comic-Con, right? Like every year, I think you and I are both. It's one of my pal time moments is I get to swing by and say hi to Scott every year when I go down.
I know. I love seeing you down there,
and I love it. I just wish our booths were closer. I could bring you an espresso, and because I always have that espresso machine in the back of my booth.
Oh my god!
I honestly got to do, because whenever friends from Alaska Comic Camp come by, I'm always like, I got free espresso. Come by and get an espresso and power up for Comic Con. Although I shouldn't say that publicly, because now readers will be like,
everybody's coming up for their Sheldon.
It's going to be a very expensive Comic Con for me as I give out espressos.
But I'm always at Gallery Nucleus, so my name isn't in the program, but I'm with Gallery Nucleus because they have a bunch of artists at their booth.
Yeah, you always have a really nice corner spot there that I love. And the display is always delightful. My daughter and I,
there.
Yeah, we love to go over and get pins.
Brad, are you there too? Are you at Comic-Con?
I used to do Comic-Con. So I live in Philadelphia. So there came a point where it just wasn't profitable for me to fly over to the coast and do that show anymore. So I ducked out.
But I will say, Scott, that I've kind of broken the seal on getting him back. So I'm hoping like every 5 years I can rope him into coming out.
Well, I'll also say this, Brian. Do you know that ALA is going to be in Philly this year?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Are you going to go?
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. It's something, again, just to kind of dip my toe a little bit. It would be worth just to spend the weekend walking around and talking to people. It's something that's been on my mind.
I will tell you, Brad,
I'll be there. It'll be my first time going.
Well, now I got a double reason.
That's
because
really
we'll
fun.
be doing cabinet head and tree head stuff. So.
Oh, great. Well,
And-
good.
and
Well, I'll come over. If no other reason, I'll come over and take you over to Reading Terminal Market, and we'll get lunch sometime over there.
I would love it.
ALA is delightful unless you're Dave Kellett and you do ALA in Las Vegas and you get sat next to Raina. And the bad side about being sat next to Raina is that's like being across the booth from I don't know who Zendaya or something, where it's like no one cares about Dave Kellett.
I'll land that one for you because I had exactly it was that but different. I was at a Wizard World, and across the aisle from me were Playboy Playmates. And my best friends walked up and down the aisle, never saw me all weekend.
That neck never turned to the left. It was always to the right. Yeah. So
nobody ever looked at me.
But I will say this, though, Scott, and this is good news for you, is that there is no more delightful, joy-filled reading and book enthusiast crowd than the ALA librarians.
Yeah,
they are the nicest people in the world. And you're going to have a
they're
great
my
time.
favorite people. They're my favorite people. In fact, the only other one I went to was the Vegas one. And Yeah, I did that for a hug machine, and that was like I think.
Wait,
it was
were you on
machine.
the same row as Raina and I?
No, I don't think so. No, because I didn't have a spot to sit. No, I just did
Never
a bunch
saw
of
you.
like round tables and stuff like that. You know,
Brad,
I
you know
didn't
what
have
would have
a-
been funny is if Scott said, "Oh, I saw Raina, I didn't see you." Yeah, well, that was my ALA.
Dude, that was such a funny one though, because I mean, librarians, they're my favorite people on the earth. They fuel everything about like what everyone loves. They know everything. But this funniest thing was I did not like having it, and it's so distracting. Like Vegas is so distracting, but it was so funny. You knew exactly who was on their way to like an ALA thing, walking through those the craps tables.
They didn't take a look at the slot machines. They didn't want to stop and play blackjack. They were
which
focused.
I'm glad about. Yeah, they were focused.
My joke that weekend was if someone had sensible shoes on, then they were going to ALA. That's how you knew in Vegas.
Exactly.
If they had sensible shoes, I was like, if vaguely nursing shoes, I was like, yep, they're going to ALA. That's it's someone that's on their feet all day at work and they know what it is to walk and they had sensible shoes on. So for Cabin Head and Tree Head, the pre-orders are open now. You can do that with any bookseller or barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com, and the art that I've seen for it is delightful, and it's a style. Actually, I wanted to ask you this question, maybe as a roundup question: is you've fallen into a style? Not fallen into. You have in your life. There's a couple different projects that incorporate this same style that we were kind of discussing before, which is a loose, energetic, joy-filled line art matched with watercolor. How would you describe that? How would you say you've come into that style? What does that style mean to you when you draw and paint in that style? Because I find it so delightful and with so much energy and joy in it. But I would love to hear how you would describe it and talk about it.
Honestly, I will say, like, as you get older, you get quicker with what you do, but you also get a little bit lazier, and you get like you cut corners, and you kind of just like I no longer tape my water paper down. There's all these things I just start so it's always warped. So I think I started trying to do that mid-century style line work that is kind of tight, but with lively line, and then just got looser and looser and looser through the years.
Yes.
And it's just like, and where my paintings, lots of times I'm like, I'm just going to call it done.
Yep.
I could noodle on this forever, but I'm just going to call it done. Like none of my paintings ever feel done to me. And it's just like, it's all about just kind of getting as far as you can with the energy you have.
Right.
And then just calling it done, So I think it just comes from, in some ways, laziness, I suppose, like the looseness,
But to flip that on its head, though, isn't it a little bit like that? What's that story / myth, Brad, about the guy that hires someone to paint his horse? And so the artist goes away and does 10,000 test sculptures of the horse, paints the horse in oils, paints the horse in gouache, paints the horse in oils, and then eventually comes back with a drawing that is 6 lines, and the guy comes in, he goes, "Oh my God, you've perfectly encapsulated my horse. How did you do this? How did you get it in 6 lines?" And the artist says, "Look in this warehouse of these 10,000 sample pieces of art that took me to get to these 6 lines."
Yeah.
And the flip side of you saying I've gotten lazier is you've also done 40,000 drawings at this point in your life.
True.
And now you know what it takes to get the message across in the simplest, cleanest, purest way possible.
Right.
You know,
I think you're right. I think laziness, that's a tough thing to say about yourself.
It could be.
We're also lazy. I'm not taking that off.
Another way of saying that is confidence. Confidence is the other way of saying that. Is that you've developed confidence. You know what you can do. You know, you've gotten to a point where, you know, you're drawing that wrist and you've drawn 100,000 wrists at this point, and there's no reason for you to go through the mechanics of that wrist. You're just going to draw it. And that's not lazy. That's confidence.
And also simplifying things helps things read better. And I think doing likenesses, like the Great Showdowns, like it's such a fun game for me to try to get the likeness in the simplest amount of lines and shapes. Like that is, like, to me, like one of my favorite games ever, and puzzles to solve. And I think, and I actually always, every single day in my life, I think about Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. Like every day I think about the one part of that where he talks about drawing yourself, drawing your character. Simplifying it means you can identify with that. The more lines I put in to try to get a likeness, the further away I get from that likeness. But the simpler I get, like, that's when you can understand it. And that's when you identify with the character, but that's also when you identify with who that character is.
Oh my God. Are we soulmates? Because I think about that page of realism to iconicity all the time. Yes. And about how the 20-year-old Dave would put too many lines and bear down trying to capture that. But in doing that, I made it unlike everything because I was trying to put too many lines in, too many. And so it ended up being more realistic and therefore was not representative of broader general. But the more you go towards iconicity, the more the reader sees themselves in the drawing, sees what they want to see in the drawing. It's more welcoming, it's more opening, it's more broad-doored and allowing more ideas in. And so oh my God, I focus on that page too. I think about that page all the time.
Well, the editing too. It's like when you make a movie, when you make anything, it's like that's when you get the clean. That's when it's what you take out. Like you can put as much as you can out. You get everything on the paper and then start taking things out till you get the simple kind of thing. Like
it's almost like sculpting. Yeah, it's almost like sculpting. It's what you're taking away.
Exactly.
But having said all that, though, one of the things, because I'm not a good caricaturist, that's never been my skill set. I can do aspects of it, but I'm not a good. That's just calling a spade a spade. It's fine. But your Great Showdowns, though, I don't know. I'm amazed every time at how much, with such simplicity, you can capture Robert Downey Jr. or the Hulk, or nothing's coming to mind, but you know what I mean? Any sort of actor or character that you're doing.
How many movies Dave has seen in the last 10 years? You can see Robert Downey Jr. or the Hulk, or movies that have been made, movie people,
or movies that might not have superheroes.
There's been movies.
No, but it is. It's I'm so appreciative of someone who can capture a likeness with such simplicity of line. Sometimes I'm looking at a Great Showdown and literally it is 7, 8, 9 lines in a face, and you have perfectly captured Scarlett Johansson. I'm like, how the hell did he do that? I genuinely don't know. Well, she's a hard one.
She's a hard one. But I'll say, like, I was just drawing Willem Dafoe, and he's a very fun one to draw. But
Dave, he was the Green Goblin.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. If we could just do that for everyone. I knew Scarlett Johansson. She was in a Marvel movie. There we go.
Yeah.
But the way I do those is like, I mean, I sketch them a lot, and sometimes I get it perfectly right when I just do a loose sketch. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this. When I actually do, how do I keep this to the end? And I scan them all in, I piece them all in Photoshop, and sometimes I'm totally taken the little eyeballs, the little dots, and I'm moving them a little bit closer together.
Yep.
A little bit further.
And then you're like at the eye doctor. Better one, better two. Better one, better two. And you can do that all afternoon.
But it makes a difference. Like, these are Tom Hanks's eyes. These are not Tom Hanks's eyes. These are Tom, so I totally get that.
Well, in Willem Dafoe, I had a little nose here, and I had the two little eyes just on either side, and I was moving them together for their part. Why is it not working? And I moved them together and then moved them all the way up. So they weren't even on either side of the thing, and that's what did it. It was like it was above the nose. Like, that's not like a human face, but it felt like him.
But then it was him.
You know what? I want to give you a compliment too, because I have a drawing in my studio of a watercolor sketch that you did of me in Alaska. I don't know if you remember this, when we were drawing each other across the table. Really fun game for artists to do. But we were drawing each other across the table, and I have yours up above my desk. And I think this is a real compliment. Someone came into my studio and said, every individual piece of that drawing of your face, the nose, the ears, the eyes, the chin, are not your nose, eyes, chin, or ears, but you put it together and the feeling is Dave Kellett. The feeling of that drawing is exactly your face, but the individual pieces, and I was like, that is the magic of Scott's art, is that it's the feeling.
Thanks, man.
You perfectly capture the feeling of something in a way that I don't know how to quantify, because somehow the pieces don't click, and yet the drawing clicks perfectly as a likeness.
Right.
As I'm saying that out loud, it sounds like an insult, but it's not. It's actually an incredible compliment.
Dude, no, that's an incredible compliment. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's the fun game of it.
It is a compliment, because Dave has a very difficult to caricature face. I know a lot of people who have tried to caricature Dave. No joke. He's got a tough face to nail down.
It's
I'm trying to figure it out right now.
The sort of Jay Leno chin makes it a little tricky.
If you got a round head, though, it's like you don't have like a long Jay Leno.
Is it oval shaped?
It's a perfectly shaped head, man. You know,
I like how you're like, you're fine. You're fine.
Beautiful head. Beautiful head.
And I'm just weeping as we get off the microphone. So I'm like, I needed that today.
No kidding. Well, listen. One thing that you said, Scott, is that you never feel like one of your pieces is done. You never feel like a painting is done. And I've got to say, we're coming upon the hour mark of this podcast, and I don't feel like this podcast is done. You gotta promise us you come back again on a future episode. You're really hearing your stories, hearing you talk about your art has been absolutely joyful. We got to have you back sometime.
Absolutely.
Please. I would love to come back. I would like to come back all the time. I love
anytime.
What are you doing next Tuesday?
Hey, listen,
weekly.
Scott, I'm just gonna tell you, we can get rid of Brad. This could be magic. You and me. Come back next Tuesday.
Can't we just be a trio?
We could drop him like a rock.
Guigar out.
So I will say, as a friend, Cabin Head and Tree Head, you can pre-order now from Tundra, which is a subsection of Random House. Is that right?
Penguin Random House.
Penguin Random House. The solo retrospective in June in New York City at Spoke Art. Go see Scott's work, and I'm so jealous for anyone. Actually, wait a minute. My wife will be in New York in June. I'm going to tell her to go see that show.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then scottc.com, you can sign up for the mailing list and check out the work. At San Diego Comic-Con, you want to go to the Gallery Nucleus booth, which is sort of in the small publishing section. Is that right? Do I have that right?
It's usually actually right near J. Scott Campbell. And
that's got to be fun. That's got to be fun.
That's got to be fun for you and him when the different fans come up. That's funny.
We've definitely gotten each other's fans. Well, I mean, I've gotten his fans more, but and right next to Image, I think where all the signing happens. But
yeah,
that's great. Well, and I will say, as a friend, thank you for being a delightful human being and an even more delightful artist. Thank you for the gifts that you have given my children and I, in the joy that we've had with your books, and for me in the art that I have of you on my walls. And it is a delight to have you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much. I love you guys. This is so fun.
And that's my cue to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful friend, Brad Guigar, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com, and the co-host of the fantastic new drawing show over at wrongwayshow.com.
And my friend, Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com, and another co-host of the drawing show at wrongwayshow.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, where we are burning up those podcast charts.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/early pre-order Cabin Head and Tree Head. So, gang, tune in next week when Brad Guigar will be proud to announce that the Comic Lab is under new management and Dave Kellett is gone. Dave Kellett's gone under new management with new co-host Scott C.
Yeah, you know what? You could do worse. We can bring Scott C in here. You can be our new manager.